I'm doing your great work and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop so I can come down to you? That is a great work from 2,000 years ago in Jerusalem, as discussed in the Bible and the book of Nehemiah. Let's discuss how this continues to affect the region and the U.S. and national security today here on the Great Work Podcast. Welcome back to the Great Work Podcast. My name is Amanda. Today is Wednesday, July 24th, 2024, and I've got some headlines that I've been keeping my eye on that I'm going to talk to you about. And again, I'm reporting these but I'm also giving my opinion. So go seek out other opinions as well if you want to learn more. First of all, I want to talk about a tweet I just sent out a little bit ago talking about a vibe shift. I saw this maybe 2 weeks ago. I think I mentioned this yesterday. And this is kind of becoming a theme for me. I think this is going to be my thing this election that I want to track. Basically, my hypothesis is based on something I saw where people are using foul language, and it's and not only are they using foul language, but people don't seem to be mad at them for using that language anymore. And I take this as an indication of like a vibe shift in the country, like kind of going away from like a woke attitude or like a policing attitude. And to me, that is going to speak well to Trump and the Republican Party as a whole, because they've kind of become like the anti-establishment, anti-woke party. I don't think that the Republicans could like control for this happening, but I think it's undoubtedly happening. And so if you follow me on Twitter, I'm going to start pointing out more of these things as I see them, because I just think it's interesting to track. So follow me along for that, but we'll get into these headlines. The first being the presidential election and kind of what's happening. It's really fascinating to me how quickly the Democrats have coalesced behind Kamala Harris. On Sunday, up until mid-afternoon, we thought that Biden was still running for president. And now, 3 days later, Kamala's got it in the bag and there's zero contention, at least publicly. Well, there's a little. We'll get to that. But I think that this is interesting, how quickly the Democrats coalesced behind her, and I'm wondering if there will start to be cracks in that foundation. AOC put out she did a live Instagram or something on Thursday night after the RNC, where she was talking about how behind the scenes there is zero consensus in the Democrat Party. Well, outwardly now there is. They're all behind Kamala. But then you saw like Black Lives Matter yesterday tweet that they would not endorse Kamala, and instead they favored a primary process, like a skinny or quick primary. Obama, in his statement not endorsing Kamala, also he seemed to indicate that he wanted there to be like some sort of a process. And that I think is interesting. It's just interesting to look at, right? Because I don't even know how they would do that. A primary would mean not just delegates get to decide, right? And Kamala notably already has all of the delegates, like the votes she needs, locked up. But I don't know. I mean, I think that there's some delegates who feel like they were alienated with Bernie being kind of kept out. And now there's probably like they're just watching her be coronated. I wonder if there will be cracks in the foundation. I don't know if there will be, but there were a couple day periods, like a 24, 36-hour period, where it seemed quiet after the debate between Biden and Trump, where it looked like the Democrats maybe weren't going to replace Biden anymore. And obviously we know that they did. So I wonder if this could take like 48, 72 hours and from now, and then have more people come out and be like, hey, we're not okay with this. But I don't know. Also, interestingly, Trump put out a lawsuit for Kamala saying that it is wrong for her to raise, or like she can't just take over the Biden-Harris campaign account. And she just raised a ton of money in that campaign account. Now, I don't think that this will go anywhere. But if people are saying that this is wrong for him to contest this, I guess the argument against that would be this probably shouldn't become the legal norm, that you just completely subvert a primary when there are significant questions that not only the country but the base has about that candidate, and they're at the last minute a candidate is just installed and then they there's zero legal barriers for them to do so. Also, this has never really happened before with like campaign finance, so issuing a lawsuit, even if it doesn't go anywhere, probably holds them up. It gets them off the ball a little bit. I think that this would fall under lawfare. Democrats have employed that against Trump. So if you support all of the, legal battles with Trump over anything, right? I don't see how you can be mad at him if he uses that against Kamala, or any Democrat. But I also think that there are some like legal questions to this that have never been answered because this hasn't been done before. So I don't know if he can find lawyers who will bring the case. That is what it is. But then this also brings me to when we're talking about Democrat consensus, we've seen a bunch of polls come out. And I've been on the record, like, we can't really trust polls about this for another week. Trump post-assassination attempt, we're just now getting accurate polls, like telling us how people are feeling about that. If you looked at the Trump-Biden debate, there were a select few polls that came out after that debate that had Biden +5 and gaining with independents. And that's what Democrats were pointing to when they were saying, oh no, don't kick him out. But 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, it was clear that Trump was +4, +5 over Biden in every swing state. It was just not feasible to keep him as a candidate. And then they forced him to resign from running for president. And to anybody saying that they didn't force him to resign, I want proof. I want to know your logic on that, because what would indicate that he did that on his own volition and on his own will? For weeks, Democrat leadership was going on morning shows saying, he needs to make his decision. He needs to make his decision. And then Biden was like, I made my decision, guys. Get behind me. Behind the scenes, if you read reporting from like Mark Halperin and other people who know people in the know, they were saying that Biden is mad, like extremely upset, and he knew he had been like cornered and like kind of taken out by leadership. And it seems like Pelosi, I said this all yesterday, either said we're going to do this the easy way or the hard way. It's very funny to me that Democrats are saying, oh, he didn't drop out because of his mental state and he did it completely on his own volition, because that is just so not in line with reality. It's very funny to me. But so we've seen this slew of polls come out. Again, we can't trust them, but it's interesting because they're way oversampling Democrats, and then they're not like, the skew is way more Democrat than Republican, and then they're not fixing for that. So like I'm seeing like Kamala's up +4 over Trump in a D+6 poll. Nobody can convince me that the Democrats are that much more ready to go out and vote in this cycle than Republicans. Like D+6 basically just means that way more Democrats than Republicans by a margin of like +6 are going to vote in this election. If anything, it's going to be even or plus or minus like 2 or 3, one way or the other. D+6, like, come on. I'm also seeing samplings of like women like +54 or +58. So like women +4, +8 over men voting. Women are reliably the voting bloc that votes more than any other voting group, right? They reliably vote, but not by that margin. Okay. Again, it's by +3, +4. I don't remember what it was in 2020 about Roe versus Wade, but I don't even think with Roe versus Wade it was +8. That's not going to happen. So when people are saying, "Oh, Kamala's doing so great in these polls," look at the margins, like look at the crosstabs. If you don't want to look at the crosstabs, just look at like, does that seem in line with you? Really? You really think that she's got like that much enthusiasm around her? Because if it was that obvious, why wouldn't they have replaced Biden with her a long time ago? Just like think logically, Yesterday people were talking too. It's funny that now Democrats are very into crowd sizes. Kamala did an event in Wisconsin, and it was the largest event of any Democrat politician this cycle, to 3,000 people in a high school gym. 3,000 people, yeah, that's a way more enthusiasm than Biden can pull. Biden would have a couple hundred people at his rallies. Trump regularly sells out arenas, not sells out, but fills arenas, because his events are free. Trump regularly fills arenas with 10 to 25,000 people. And then the Democrats are saying, oh, well, Kamala, she got 3,000. Again, way more enthusiasm than Biden, and that can totally build over time. And my friend keeps bringing up, and this is a correct point, Democrats are going to have Kamala has way more, better surrogates for her on the campaign trail that can, like, go speak on her behalf. Biden, like Joe and Jill, could go out on her behalf, although I don't think that they'll want them to. I think that they're really going to try and distance her from them. The Obamas could go out on her behalf, and the Clintons could go out on her behalf. And the Clintons and Obamas can drive out a huge crowd. And that's not to speak about celebrities, too. So if Taylor Swift or someone went out for Kamala, that would drive out such large crowds. So she could easily be ahead of Trump soon with that. But it's just funny to me. Then the next thing, Netanyahu is addressing Congress today. And at the time I'm recording this, 10 a.m. Central Time, there's contention. So yesterday there was a group of pro-Palestinian demonstrators who sat in the Capitol Rotunda screaming, like, ceasefire now and stop the genocide and all of that. And I guess some of these same pro-Palestine supporters left maggots and, like, bugs in the Watergate Hotel, which is a secure facility, and that's where I guess Netanyahu is staying. So now the halls in these conference rooms are filled with maggots, which is disgusting, and those people should be arrested. And again, that's not a peaceful protest to infest bugs in a hotel in DC. So that's going on, and I would just wonder how the public's going to react to that, because I don't think that people like this, like, again, vibe shift, I don't think that people like the childish behavior. And so we also have this kind of thing now where there are some Democrats that are not going to the Netanyahu address of Congress, including Vice President Kamala Harris, and she's the president of the Senate, so she would be sitting behind him. Now, pro-Palestinians are presenting this as if, like, this is all in response to, like, the war or the genocide in Gaza, and, like, it's too politically unpopular for them to support them. And I just want to remind you guys, there are some things that go beyond politics and government, okay? It's not all about getting the pro-Palestine vote. They make up less than 5% of the electorate. They probably make up less than 1% of the electorate, honestly. These one-issue voters on Palestine, there's nothing that Joe or Kamala can do to win these voters back. And while they make things very annoying for them, and I think that they would want to avoid a confrontation with, like, a very passionate activist, that the video could be, plastered everywhere and misconstrued. I can see that being a problem for them, but I don't think that, I think this narrative that, like, oh, the Democrats won't go because it's politically unpopular for them to, like, or they're in support of, the Palestinians, and, like, because that would mean Hamas in this case, and they're not, except for, like, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. Like, that's, to me, that is not the reason that they're skipping. It's shameful that they're skipping. It's disgusting, but I don't think that's the reason. I think the reason is because there's also this talk about a meeting going on between Netanyahu and Biden. And Netanyahu put out a statement last weekend, or Biden clearly had a lot going on over the weekend, right? He was either sick with COVID, or he's in decline, or he, in my opinion, was really mad and, like, really frustrated. And, like, that's why he wasn't really seen on camera for a while, because he was mad and he had to, like, control himself a little bit. So he wasn't getting back to Netanyahu. Netanyahu obviously is in the United States. And so Netanyahu put out a statement being like, I don't know, we haven't heard from the Biden administration, so we don't know if there's going to be a meeting, which pissed off Biden. So then Biden canceled the meeting, and he said, indefinitely, he said he's not going to reschedule it, and he cited health reasons. Now, I guess it has come out since that he will meet with Netanyahu. And Kamala, after that, also said, well, I might meet with Biden or with Netanyahu, I might not, I don't know. And then ultimately now she is not, and she's not attending the address. And then a bunch of congressional Democrats, I believe the last number I saw was yesterday out by Politico, it was 27 Democrats, but that might be larger now in the lead up to the address. I think they're trying to defend Biden behind the scenes. I think that they look at that as Netanyahu, like, kind of meddling with, like, U.S. elections and stuff, stroking a sensitive subject for Biden at the time. And I think that they want to use that against, or they don't want to, like, show support of Netanyahu in light of what he just did. I also think Trump picks up on this, because Trump is meeting with Netanyahu at Mar-a-Lago, and he put out a statement last night on his Truth Social where he posted that he's excited to meet with Netanyahu, but then he also put out in that same truth a photo of a letter he received from Mahmoud Abbas, like in the wake of the assassination attempt, which is like, what timeline are we on? There's a lot of people mad about him doing that, or like confused about why he would do that. It is kind of confusing, but in my opinion, I interpret it as Trump wants to show that he can be in charge, and like a lot of people in the Middle East respect him. Obviously, Abraham Accords. It's also interesting to me to think that, like, have there been communications ongoing for the last 4 years between Abbas and Trump? Because that would be like wild and hilarious. Abbas addresses him as H.E. Donald Trump, so His Excellency Donald Trump, which is hilarious. Also, liberals are saying that this violates the Logan Act, and it doesn't. Logan Act would be communications between two heads of state. Trump's not a head of state right now. He's not an elected official. So I don't think that this violates the Logan Act if I read that statute correctly. But like, it's just all very interesting. And like, Trump famously didn't always get along with Bibi too. Like in the Abraham Accords, Bibi kind of hijacked that as a campaign speech, the announcement of the Abraham Accords. Or maybe it wasn't the actual announcement, it was one of the announcements leading up to it where they were like getting there. Something between the Israelis and Palestinians. I don't quite recall, but I remember Jared Kushner writing about it in his book about his time in the White House when he got to the Abraham Accords and like Middle East peace part of it. I remember Trump was like very mad and almost endorsed Bibi's opponent when Bibi kind of hijacked that meeting. So I think it's funny because I think US politicians don't like Bibi for this reason sometimes, not because they're not supportive of Israel, but because Bibi does this. He like cares more about Israel than anything else, which is why Israelis like him. You know, but I think that they get mad when Bibi will like use the press to do things like that. Beyond that, I think that's the biggest reason that Democrats are not going to his congressional address. Bibi wants, like, when he can address the United States Congress, one of the reasons that Israelis continue to support him, even if they don't agree with him all the time, is because Israelis understand the importance of an alliance between Israel and the United States. They understand they buy weapons from us. They understand that we need them, or that they need us at the United Nations, like for our Security Council veto power. They understand that. And so when they elect leadership, they want leadership that gets along with the U.S. And so when Bibi can come here on an official, like in an official capacity and address Congress, that keeps a lot of people supporting him because, you know, that just makes it look like he has the weight of America behind him, and that's very important to Israelis. But so I think that Democrats don't want to give him that win, especially because it is very apparent that the Democrats would rather deal with Benny Gantz, which is his like kind of chief opponent right now, than him. I think that they would rather, and Benny Gantz resigned from the war cabinet over disagreements with Bibi, and I think it's very obvious, like when Bibi goes to the Middle East or to Israel, he will meet with Bibi and Gantz. I think it's just obvious they'd prefer Gantz, and so they don't want to make it look like they prefer Bibi or give Bibi that political power. The last thing I'll say about this is, while I understand, I don't think this has to do with like getting pro-Palestine votes. I understand that this is like kind of like a thing that Democrats are doing because like to stick it to Bibi for like doing that to Biden, or not wanting him to be in control anymore in Israel and not give him like outsized political influence and give him that win. I think it's shameful that they're doing this, and the reason for that is David Daoud from Foundation for Defense of Democracies put this statement out, this report out like maybe a month or two ago, talking about how he and a colleague of his noticed that there was an increase in attacks from Hezbollah when they could sense tension between the U.S. administration and Israel. So when Hezbollah started striking Israel at the beginning of the war on October 8th, they were first like sending rockets into the Sheba farms, which is a contentious area. Israel claims it as its own. Hezbollah claims it as Lebanon's, and the UN considers it Syria's, and then Syria sometimes says it's theirs and sometimes says it belongs to Lebanon, and it just kind of depends. So it's like 3 different countries kind of claim this area, and it's kind of messy, and nobody lives there. So Hezbollah starts firing at the Sheba farms, which is technically a provocation, but Israel's not going to do anything about it because it's contentious and because nobody's like in harm's way, really. They evacuated the entire north. And then Hezbollah has like upped the ante over time. And I think that they believe that Israel's not really going to fully engage in a war right now, especially with the war going on in Gaza. So they're just kind of trying to see as like how much can they get away with Israel, so they can paint that as a win to their constituency and to their base, while at the same time not getting involved in a war that would leave them completely wiped out. But as David Daoud puts in this report, and I can link it below, basically he's noticed that when Hezbollah started striking further into Israeli territory, and using like bigger rockets and stuff, that was when there seemed to be a contention between the U.S. administration and Israel. So like an example he gave with that was when the U.S. said that we were going to delay a weapon shipment or not send a weapon shipment. This was like in May. That's when Hezbollah really picked up its attacks. And there were other like examples of that he cites in the report. So if we see Hezbollah or other Iranian proxies really start striking more at Israel right now, to me, I would blame that on the administration trying to distance themselves from Bibi and not show that the U.S. is fully backing our ally, because it's just a bad look, right? I understand completely why they're doing it politically. I completely get it. I understand why like a lot of people have problems with Bibi, but I also think that like every time the Democrats have a way to like make this war not get worse, they seem to choose the thing that makes it worse. So I don't, that's a whole thing too. But that brings us to the final part of this, what I want to talk about today, which are two new kind of deals have come out, or thoughts about the day after scenario in Gaza have come out. So right now, obviously, I've put out TikTok videos about this. They're doing a trial in like Beit Hanoun and Beit Lahia and one other area of the northern Gaza Strip, where they're doing these bubbles of self-governance where Gazans are overseeing the distribution of aid, and if they do well with that, then they will get self-governance over that little bubble, the 3 separate bubbles. So we're seeing that, but that's not going to work for the entire Gaza Strip, so there's kind of a lot of dueling scenarios. And another critique of Bibi has been that he won't lay out what he wants to be the day after scenario. And I believe even Yoav Gallant put out what he wanted to do, and Bibi like immediately struck it down, which then apparently I guess he is now presenting as his own, according to this report from Barak Ravid, which I'm going to get to in a minute, but that is questionable too. So the first thing that came out is the former U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, who was the ambassador under President Trump, came out in favor of, like, this is crazy, saying that he thinks Israel should completely annex the West Bank and just not allow Palestinians to vote, which sounds like apartheid. He says it would be like Puerto Rico, like the U.S. and Puerto Rico, where Puerto Rico can vote in primaries for parties. They can vote for like their own governance, but they have all of the like rights and legal protections of Americans, but they're not the 51st state. So they might even vote in presidential elections. They just don't get representation in the Electoral College. So the obvious critique of that plan is that it will be considered apartheid. That's the obvious critique of that. But I think that there's something to be said about looking outside of the two-state solution. It's been the norm for so long to talk about a two-state solution, and it hasn't worked. It's been 30 or 40 years that we've talked about it, 30 years that we've been talking about a two-state solution. And over and over again, nobody can get something done on the framework of a two-state solution. So that's not working. Another thing about this is, right now, one of the claims of apartheid is that Palestinians do not have the same legal rights and protections because they're considered under their own government. If they're under the PA in Area A, they don't have the same legal rights as Israelis because they're under a different government. And the global community loves to say that that's apartheid, even though it is not apartheid, just in any sense of the imagination, anyone's imagination. But under Friedman's plan, that wouldn't exist anymore. The Palestinians would have like the legal rights and stuff of Israelis. Just, again, it wouldn't sacrifice Israel being a Jewish state. Because right now, some percentage of the West Bank is hostile to the state of Israel, clearly, because we're seeing basically a third intifada for the last 2 years in the West Bank. That's why Bibi moved troops from Gaza to the West Bank, because it's been so bad over there. You know, if Israel doesn't fully take over and de-radicalize that population, it's not going to get any better. If they annex it, they oversee education and things like that, and they give more legal rights and protections, that could be something. I don't know. It's a weird plan. I don't think it'll go anywhere, but it's kind of, I don't even agree with it, but I think it's interesting to think about some of the points. And then the last one, okay, the latest report has come out from Barak Ravid that there was a secret meeting, trilateral meeting between the UAE, Israel, and America in Abu Dhabi last Thursday, overseeing what the day after plan in Gaza will look like. Now, when I said that Yoav Gallant put out a report that Bibi immediately struck down, apparently at this meeting, Bibi took Gallant's plan and was basically presenting it as his own. That's what Ravid is reporting. I have questions about that. Barak Ravid is like the chief Middle East correspondent that the Biden administration likes to leak things to. And so, I don't know. To me, again, I just see a tit for tat going on behind the scenes between the Biden administration and between like Netanyahu. And I think that right now, I think that they're just in like a kind of petty tit for tat, and they're like leaking like unfavorable things about each other. And that to me is probably what I would chalk that point up to. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but I think it's petty that it's being brought up. But another thing about the day after, like this whole plan, is the day before they had the secret meeting, a foreign minister for the Emiratis put out an op-ed saying like kind of what their solution would be and like kind of what they see their role in as, you know, for a day after scenario for the Emiratis. They want to be involved. They don't want to be involved without the PA. They don't want to be involved if there's no discussion of a two-state framework. They don't want to be involved. They want the PA to reform itself, like they need it to be, and they want there to be like an international security coalition. So they're willing to bring troops there, but they don't want to be the only ones, I guess is the best way of putting it. And Bibi opposed some of these points for a long time. He doesn't want to discuss a two-state solution. And his response for that would be, we're not going to reward the Palestinians with the two-state solution after what Hamas did, because that is basically incentivizing them to massacre Israelis. Another point of contention with that is he doesn't want to end the war. So he doesn't want to end the war because he wants to continue rooting out Hamas. Notably, the UAE doesn't want to oversee any government whatsoever in the Gaza Strip, which includes Hamas as a part of it, but there is kind of that component. And notably also China just did a bilateral meeting between Hamas and Fatah, which kind of, I guess, was to signal unity and a unified PA once again. Now, obviously, that doesn't really matter if the US and Israel were not involved in that meeting. It doesn't really matter if Hamas and Fatah are going to realign. And if I had $1 for every time I saw a headline that China was making waves between like uniting the Palestinians or like supporting the Palestinians in some way, or Russia, I would be richer than Mahmoud Abbas and Yasser Arafat combined. Okay. That's probably nothing. It's a sideshow in my opinion. But back to the report about the day after scenario from Barak Ravid of Axios. Basically, this meeting went well between the U.S., Israel, and the Emiratis. It seems like they're making waves. Again, the UAE wants U.S. security involvement. Israel has some points of contention with some of UAE's points, mainly that they don't want the PA involved. And what's interesting, too, is like the Emiratis want a reformed PA. And they replaced their prime minister. The PA chose a new prime minister. They didn't elect one. Mahmoud Abbas appointed a new one. In like maybe December of last year, Mohammed Mustafa, and his claim to fame, or like why he was given the role, is because previously he was he oversaw the Palestinian Investment Fund, which is Abbas's slush fund. There were more reports at the end of April that there was a meeting like kind of held off to the side of the World Economic Forum where the Emiratis and the Palestinian Authority leaders got into a really heated debate. The Emiratis, like, they were screaming at each other. And the Emiratis were saying that the Palestinian Authority like steals money and like they need to care more about their people rather than Israel and all of this stuff, which is interesting because I think the West looks at it as like the entire Arab world just stands behind the PA, and that's not really true. I think that like a lot of Middle Eastern leaders see the PA as extremely corrupt, and that meeting is evidence of that, yelling at Abbas for corruption. And again, like this is nuance that just like the average person in America just would never understand. But like I think the Emiratis care deeply about the Palestinian people, and they see one of the big problems is that the PA doesn't really do anything for them. They steal a lot of money from international aid and don't use it for the right reason. So this is an interesting thing to keep your eye on, to see where this goes. If there's a better framework for the day after scenario in Gaza, that could mean the war wraps up more quickly. It's also looking very likely that Mohammed Daif, the commander or like the leader of Al-Qassam brigades, which is Hamas's military, it looks like he was assassinated. And it's pretty clear that there was not one clear leader to take over after the elimination of Daif. So Hamas has really decreased its attacks on Israel after the assassination that I believe has been confirmed now of Daif. They were doing like 5 to 6 attacks per day. Now it's down to like 1 to 2 attacks per day on average, since his elimination. And that would point to, the top of their command structure being taken out, and they don't have an adequate command structure in place because Israel's arrested or eliminated a lot of Hamas's command structure. The one person the main leader that they still have not eliminated would be Sinwar, and there's other U.S. intelligence reports that he is the holdout, but nobody can find him. And so, again, if Israel can push the rest of Hamas to surrender, and even if someone could give up Sinwar, they could completely end this war. Well, then they need a day after strategy. We're starting to get some indications on what those will look like. So I'll maybe link that below. But that's your kind of episode for today. Just a couple headlines I'm watching. If you like this, rate me 5 stars and share with your friends so I know that you like it, and I will talk to you tomorrow. An Excelsior Studios original production.
A Hamilton County woman is facing serious charges accused of scamming several people out of rental homes.
April 26, 2023 was a normal day for most in the suburbs of Indianapolis, but it was shaping up to be a very bad day for 25-year-old Megan Stoner, who was notified of a warrant out for her arrest.
9 charges for corrupt business influence fraud, where the loss is between $750,000 and $50,000, and theft.
And unfortunately for Megan, she would not be navigating her newfound legal troubles in private, because a community of hundreds who had been quietly watching her for years was assembling on the internet to discuss their experiences with her, which ranged from bizarre to dangerous to outright criminal, arguably worse than what Megan had been charged with.
Basically what she did was emotionally manipulated and I'll say abused even me for about nearly these 10 years.
And she will suck you dry. Any inch you give her, she just takes them out.
Google number after Google number. You block the one, she's not done yet. She's going to get that last word.
The second you let her in, she takes over. And I would wake up to 20, 30, 40 notifications. She was scrolling back through things from my high school.
He's a dangerous human being.
And the strangest thing of all is, as her case unfolded, she continued to interact with this online community, which she called her haters, which was made up of business owners she had scammed, politicos from throughout the country that she had solicited for donations, a network of evangelical pastors located outside of the United States, a local brigade of moms who had called out her antics in Facebook groups for years, and even a sex shaman ended up coming together to solve crimes that she had not yet been caught for, and were able to catch her after she ran from the police for a month and finally put her in jail. So, how did this self-described political consultant, mental health advocate, teacher, and sexual assault survivor get into this mess in the first place? And how much of her story that she had told of herself on social media for years was actually true? that's what we'll explore here every Thursday on Don't Waste This Fucking Podcast, the story of Megan Stoner.